Welcome back to the Andrew Tate Show by GSMC Sports. In the first segment, we talked about the postponement of the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight. Last segment, we were talking about the Dallas Cowboys and Trey Lance's role, Dak Prescott's role, etc., how all of that might shake out. And now moving into this third segment, we are moving on to college sports and that recent settlement. And let me just get things set up quickly. And during the recent SEC spring meeting, a major topic of discussion among chancellors and coaches was the allocation of a $20 million settlement. The settlement has sparked a debate over how to distribute the funds in a manner that aligns with both the financial priorities of the conference and the legal requirements of Title IX. Title IX is a federal civil rights law that was enacted as part of the Education Amendments of 1972. It prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or any other education program that receives federal funding. For college athletics, Title IX mandates that men and women have equitable opportunities to participate in sports and that scholarship allocations, treatments, and benefits are also equitable. At the heart of the SEC's discussion is whether to split the $20 million settlement evenly between the men's and women's sports or to allocate a larger portion to football and divide the remainder among other sports. This debate is not just about finances, it's about compliance with federal law and ensuring that the spirit of Title IX is honored. Proponents of an equal split argue that doing so would directly support the principles of Title IX, ensuring that female athletes receive comparable opportunities and resources as their male counterparts. An even distribution would promote gender equity, potentially funding improvements in facilities, coaching, and scholarships for women's sports, which are often underfunded compared to men's programs. On the other hand, some argue that a larger allocation to football is justified due to the sport's significant revenue generation and high operational costs. Football programs often serve as the financial backbone for many athletic departments, and investing heavily in football could yield returns that benefit the entire athletic department, including women's sports. This perspective suggests that by strengthening football, the overall financial health of the athletic program can be improved, potentially leading to more resources for all sports over time. The SEC faces the challenge of balancing these financial realities with legal obligations. Title IX compliance is non-negotiable, and any perceived inequity in fund distribution could lead to legal challenges and reputational damage. However, the financial pressures and competitive nature of college football necessitates substantial investment to maintain and enhance program quality. Several potential solutions could address this dilemma. One approach could be to allocate a significant portion of the settlement to football, but ensure that the remaining funds are used in a manner that directly benefits women's sports. This could include targeted investments in women's sports facilities, scholarships, and recruitment efforts. Another solution might involve setting aside a portion of the funds to establish endowments for women's sports, ensuring long-term financial support. This approach could provide a sustainable funding model that supports gender equity over time. How the SEC resolves this issue could set a precedent for other conferences facing similar financial decisions. The outcome will be closely watched by athletic departments nationwide, legal experts, and advocates for gender equity in sports. The decision will also reflect on the SEC's commitment to both compliance with federal law and the promotion of fair and equitable treatment of all student athletes. Tate, as we've said before, things just keep getting more and more complicated in college sports. Talk about this latest meeting and the conversation around Title IX.
Okay, first I want to get a little clarification on a couple of things. When you hear the word settlement, it's kind of like, oh, they got a nice settlement that came in. No. This isn't some like Daddy Warbucks came in and dropped some cash on you. This is the settlement that the NCAA has had with the lawsuit for name, image, and likeness for the players who played in the past but were not eligible to make money with their name, image, and likeness. And so the settlement has been, I forget how many, it's like a $2 billion settlement that was out there. But part of that agreement is that each university needed to set aside $22 million for paying players going forward. So players can start making money and getting paid on a regular basis going forward. So there's not a financial windfall here. It is just more of a financial requirement that each university needs to have. Now, with that being said, that 22,000, when you start thinking about that and you're figuring out how are you going to divide that money up? Title IX is the one thing that I'm very curious about, because with Title IX, it needs to be fair and equitable split here, meaning half should go to men, half should go to women. So does that mean you split that 22 and it's 11 for men's sports and 11 for women's sports? Financially, you can't. It's just, I don't know any university that would be willing to do that. Football generates so much revenue. Football is so important. And so, but then you look at, there's people are wondering, okay, can we take like an 80-20 split where 80% of the money goes to the football program, and then 20% is divided up, 10 for the women, 10 for the men, where it's an equal split that way? Well, my concern is when you sit down, if someone challenges this and takes it to a judge, and you look around that and you say, okay, this is the way we split this up. We took 80% to the football program because that's super important. And then we divided it 10 and 10 for men's sport and women's sports. Well, you don't have to be a mathematician to look at this and say, hey, 90% of the money went to the men and 10% went to the women. And there's where you're going to have some problems there. I could see someone really throwing a lawsuit against that. So, because it would not be fair and equitable to say, yes, there was $22 million set aside, but 90% of that went to the men. How do you look at that and say that's fair and equitable? Because it's not. So that's the interesting thing on what kind of pitfalls will universities run into, because at some point someone will look at that and be like, the math isn't mathing. You can't tell me that by giving us 10% of the money, we are fair and balanced between men and women's sports. That's the thing that's very curious. Now, the way some people are, and there's no clarification. The universities are asking for clarification. That's one of the things that's been coming up that came up at the SEC meetings, was people were trying to figure out, like, hey, can we do this? Because I could see it going this way, or I could see it going that way. And no one truly has an answer right now. And some universities are looking at it as, let's say, if we took, we set up endowments and we did this, this, and this, and this to make it so it balances out, and set up scholarships for every scholarship that's given by the men, the women get an equal scholarship. That looks like the biggest, like, to make the most sense is to even out the scholarships there, because using that 22 million, I think it's going to be an issue. With that being said, that's a tough hurdle. But football, as an athletic director, football is priority number one. College basketball is priority number two. And football is going to eat up a lot of this. For major universities, for the Alabamas and the Georgias, the Texases and the Oregons of the world, not as hard. But when you start going down to some of the smaller universities, or the universities that are not making huge chunks of cash, the cows of the world, the Boise States, the Montana universities of the world. When you start looking at that and you're trying to make it fair and balanced, they're going to run into some issues. And I don't know what the real answer is, because this settlement merely gave a solution on this is what we should happen. 22 million set aside to pay players, but there was no real cut guidelines. There was no, hey, this is how we settle it. This portion goes here, this portion settles with Title IX. I feel like that's been the issue with college football this whole time. They make short-term solutions that don't solve the long-term problem. The long-term problem is college football is a big monster, and it's growing, and it's a big money winner. And eventually, college football is going to either have to spin off on its own and then let college sports run, the rest of college sports run together with Title IX can fit in there. Something has to be done to address this, because eventually it's going to happen. There's been a lot of, with college football, just kick the can down the road, and hopefully we'll find a new solution later. And it doesn't seem like college football ever really finds a new solution.
It does seem that things get more complicated and less clear. There's no clear-cut answers, and everything, especially now when we are seeing so many different types of lawsuits and things happening with legal action. You want to be very careful in terms of something like Title IX, because it is federally mandated.
Right. And Title IX can be that's the one that could really shake things up. Because like there is no true, instruction manual, exactly word for word. This is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way it has to be. And when you have a vague ruling like this, when it's vague, different universities are going to interpret things differently. As they start interpreting things differently, one university is going to look around and say, well, I looked over and Georgia's taking 80% and giving other men 10% in this school 10%, but then not realizing or not even noticing that, Georgia didn't put in, more scholarships for women, endowments, increase funding to, for infrastructure for women's sports. They've done all these other things. A lot of times some universities don't realize that. And so bigger universities may figure out how to make it fair and equitable, where other ones just look at, okay, this is what they did. They took 80% and took it to football. We're going to take 80% and turn it to football and just leave the rest alone, and not seeing that there's some additional funding that is going from the budget to take care of the women's sports and the other Olympic sports. That's where not having a playbook that gives you clear directions, there's a problem there.
In some ways, it leaves it open to creativity and interpretation, but that can lead.
Well, when you're talking,
you never know.
And you're talking about it leads to creativity and interpretation. There's very few universities are going to say, you know what, I'm going to get creative and I'm going to figure out how to get more women, more sport, more money to the women. When you're looking around and only the football team's making money, everyone else is costing us money.
Yep.
Or the men's basketball and the men's football team, that's the only one making us money. There's a lot less motivation to say, let's get creative and take care of the women. And that's what I'm most concerned about.
Absolutely. We are going to, on that note, we are going to take our next break. When we come back, we'll be switching to celebrity news, although it's a good segue because it's The Rock. So, you've got still little sports, little athlete, but also entertainment and celebrity news. You are tuned into the Andrew Tate Show by GSMC Sports, and we will be right back.